If your life feels out of order, maybe it's because God is out of place. Watch this, it might be the shift your soul needs. You can have talent. You can have goals. You can have a schedule packed with the best intentions. But if God isn't first, none of it flows right. There's a kind of invisible disorder that creeps in when he's not in his rightful place. And it doesn't always show up as chaos. Sometimes it looks like success, busyness, movement. But underneath the surface, things start to slip. Peace becomes fragile. Decisions feel forced. Your joy leaks. And your soul starts asking, why does everything feel off even when nothing seems wrong? That feeling of striving but never arriving is often the symptom of misplaced priorities. You were never created to function with God on the sidelines. He wasn't meant to be a part of your life. He was meant to be the center of it. Everything else is supposed to orbit around him, not the other way around. But we live in a world that teaches the opposite. Chase what you want and invite God along later. Build your plans, then ask him to bless them. Run toward your goals, then cry out when things collapse. And we wonder why our peace is so unstable. Look at how Genesis begins. In the beginning, God, not goals, not dreams, not strategy, not effort. God first. And when he is first, everything else follows divine order. Creation unfolds with balance. Light separates from darkness. The waters know their boundaries. Life flourishes. But when God is removed from that center, the opposite happens. Confusion, darkness, frustration. That's not just poetic imagery. It's spiritual reality. When the Creator is no longer the reference point, everything loses shape. Jesus echoed this truth when he said in John 15 verse 5, "Apart from me, you can do nothing." Think about that. Nothing. Not just less. Not just slower. Nothing that truly lasts. Nothing that truly satisfies. Sure, you might build a platform, gain attention, earn income, but without him, it's all a house of cards. One gust of disappointment, and it crumbles. That's why some people reach their dream life and still feel hollow inside. Because you can't fill a God-shaped space with anything less than God himself. Let's make it real. Maybe you've been trying to make life work. You've been organizing, planning, adjusting. You're not lazy. You're not passive. You're doing your best. But something still isn't clicking. You fix one area, and another starts falling apart. You pour into your career, and your relationships feel neglected. You pour into your family, and your spirit feels dry. That constant tension, that's not because you're broken, it's because your foundation is misaligned. God is not the last piece you add to your puzzle. He is the picture on the box. Without him, the pieces don't make sense. They don't fit right. And you can spend your whole life trying to force things into place, but until he becomes the center again, it will never feel whole. That's not a threat. That's a rescue. It's God's way of saying, I didn't design you to live disconnected from me. I didn't make you to survive off fragments of peace. I created you for full alignment. It's easy to drift, though. Even with the best intentions. You start out putting God first, then work piles up. Then emotions take over. Then distractions multiply. Before long, God's voice feels distant, not because he left, but because the noise got louder. And sometimes you don't even realize it until you hit a wall, until the strength runs out, until the success feels shallow. That's often when people look up and say, something's missing, and that something is usually God in his rightful place. Putting God first doesn't mean ignoring your responsibilities. It means seeing all things through him. It means starting your decisions with prayer, starting your day with surrender, starting your goals with his presence. It's not about becoming ultra-religious. It's about becoming spiritually aware. Aware that the health of your soul shapes the health of your whole life. And when God is at the center, everything else aligns, even the hard stuff. You'll still face challenges, but you won't face them alone, or confused, or spiritually dry. When God is not first, even the good things become burdens. Ministry becomes pressure. Family becomes stress. Ambition becomes obsession. But when he takes his seat again at the center, burdens lift. Vision returns. Clarity sharpens. That's not romantic talk. That's the fruit of alignment. That's the evidence of order. Because your soul was never meant to lead, it was meant to follow. And the only voice it was designed to follow first is the voice of your Creator. So ask yourself gently tonight, is God really first in your life right now? Not just in theory, but in time, in decisions, in thought life? Does your schedule reflect surrender? Does your mind return to Him when you feel anxious? Do you invite Him into the planning, or just the panic? These aren't questions of shame. They're invitations to realign, to pause, to reset. Because God isn't mad at you. He's just waiting. Waiting for space. Waiting to lead again. Waiting to be first. And the moment you put Him back in His place, the moment you say, Lord, I've tried my way. Now you lead. Something shifts. Things may not change instantly on the outside, but inside, peace begins to settle. It's like your soul breathes again. Because everything starts working when God takes His rightful place. There's a strange comfort in feeling in control. It makes you feel safe, secure, like you can predict what's coming next. That if you plan enough, work hard enough, worry just the right amount, you can prevent things from falling apart. But what if that control is an illusion? What if the need to control is the very thing that's keeping you from peace, from purpose, from God Himself? Let's be honest, control is intoxicating. It gives us the illusion of power, the feeling that we're managing life, that if we don't do it, no one else will. That if we just keep our hands on everything, relationships, finances, outcomes, we'll be okay. But underneath that mindset is fear. The fear that if we let go, everything might crash. And in that fear, we edge God out. Not because we mean to, but because surrender feels too risky. But here's the truth most people don't say out loud. You're not actually in control. You never really were. You don't control who stays in your life. You don't control what people think. You don't control tomorrow's news or that diagnosis or that phone call that changes everything. And no amount of stress will stop a door from closing if God isn't in it. That doesn't make you powerless. It makes you human. And being human means needing help, needing direction, needing God. Think of Abraham and Sarah. God gave them a promise, child. But when it didn't happen quickly, they took matters into their own hands. Sarah gave Hagar to Abraham, and Ishmael was born. But that wasn't the promise. That was the product of control. And it created years of conflict and pain. Why? Because trying to force God's promises through our own plans never works. It delays the blessing. It adds unnecessary battles. And it leaves you tired, not triumphant. How often do we do the same? God tells us to wait, but we push. He whispers, trust me, and we react instead. We draft plans He never wrote. We chase relationships He never approved. We pursue outcomes He never promised. And when it all unravels, we wonder where He went. But God hasn't moved. We just grabbed the steering wheel and refused to let go. We've trusted our vision more than His voice. Control doesn't bring peace. It brings pressure. The kind that keeps you up at night, running through whiffs. The kind that tightens your chest when life feels uncertain. But here's the beautiful paradox. Peace doesn't come from managing everything. It comes from surrendering everything. Peace comes when you finally say, God, you know better. You see more. You lead, and let Him actually do it. Jesus showed us this in the most painful moment of His life. In the Garden of Gethsemane, He prayed, not my will, but yours be done. That's surrender. That's trust in the middle of agony. He could have called angels. He could have stopped the cross. But He chose obedience. And through that surrender, salvation came. That's the power of letting go. You may lose your illusion of control, but you gain something far greater, God's perfect will. Maybe you've been white-knuckling an outcome lately, trying to fix someone, trying to force a result, trying to hold it all together. And maybe you're exhausted. That's not weakness, that's a warning light. That's your soul telling you, this isn't sustainable, because you weren't meant to carry what only God can hold. You weren't created to figure everything out alone. You were created to walk in step with Him, not run ahead trying to fix what you don't fully understand. It might feel scary to let go. You might be afraid that surrender means losing, that if you stop controlling, you'll be forgotten. But God doesn't forget the ones who trust Him. In fact, Psalm 9 verse 10 says, "Those who know your name trust in you, for you, Lord, have never forsaken those who seek you." Never. Not once. That's the record of heaven. When you release control, you're not falling into chaos, you're falling into the faithfulness of God. So, how do you do it? How do you let go when everything in you wants to hold on? You start small. You pray before making the decision. You breathe before reacting. You open the Bible instead of opening your stress cycle. And you say it out loud. God, I want to control this, but I choose to trust you. Sometimes that's all it takes. Just one sentence of honesty. And the grip starts to loosen. Let's make it practical. If you've been trying to control your finances, tithe, even when it feels risky. That's trust. If you've been trying to control a relationship, pray instead of press. That's trust. If you've been trying to control your future, declare Proverbs 3 verses 5 to 6. Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. Not some of your heart, all of it. There's a strange kind of freedom that only comes when you stop trying to be your own God. When you admit that you don't have all the answers. When you finally let go of the illusion and say, God, I'd rather follow you than keep pretending I'm in charge. That's when the pressure lifts. That's when your soul starts breathing again. Not because everything's solved, but because now God is steering. There's a strange danger in being constantly busy. You might never notice you're running on empty. The world will praise your hustle. People will admire your consistency. You'll look productive, even blessed. But deep inside, something's off. You wake up tired. You go to sleep anxious. You're accomplishing tasks, but not bearing fruit. That's the trap. You're moving, but you're not thriving. You're active, but spiritually dehydrated. And no one can see it but you and God. You can serve in ministry and still feel dry. You can show up for people and still feel unseen. You can pour out wisdom and still feel lost. Because doing for God is not the same as being with God. And that's where so many of us lose the connection. We confuse activity with intimacy. We think motion equals meaning. But Jesus taught something completely different. In Luke 10, we see the story of Martha and Mary. Martha was busy serving, preparing, making sure everything was perfect. But Mary? She sat at Jesus' feet, listening. Martha got frustrated. She even asked Jesus to tell Mary to help. But his response was gentle and piercing. Martha, you are worried and upset about many things, but only one thing is necessary. Mary has chosen what is better. That's a hard word for the busy heart. But it's also a rescue. Jesus wasn't rebuking Martha's work. He was correcting her priorities. And in doing so, he revealed something profound. You can be productive and still miss his presence. You can get so caught up in the doing that you forget who you're doing it for. And slowly, subtly, you burn out. Not because you're lazy, but because you've become spiritually disconnected. Burnout doesn't always look like collapse. Sometimes it looks like routine without joy. Reading the Bible, but not hearing God. Praying, but not connecting. Serving, but not smiling. That's not disobedience, that's depletion. And God doesn't condemn you for it. He invites you to come back, to sit again, to stop striving and start receiving, to let him fill you before you pour again. Maybe you've been there, or maybe you're there now. You've been showing up for work, for family, even for ministry, but inside something's empty. You're not hearing God like you used to. Worship feels flat. Your soul feels distant. That's not a sign to push harder. That's a signal to pause, to pull back, to return to the source. Because activity without intimacy is dangerous. It creates leaders who are gifted but hollow, believers who are loud but lost. You were never meant to run on spiritual fumes. You were created for daily filling, daily presence. Like manna in the wilderness, you can't live on yesterday's encounter. You need fresh bread every day. And that doesn't happen in the noise. It happens in the stillness. In the mornings you don't feel like praying. In the quiet minutes before bed. In the pauses between meetings when you whisper, God, I miss you. Jesus modeled this. Even in the height of his ministry, he withdrew to lonely places and prayed. He didn't just preach, he replenished. He didn't just heal, he listened to the Father. And if he, being perfect, needed that kind of rhythm, how much more do we? You're not weak for needing rest. You're not lazy for needing to stop. You're wise when you recognize your limits and run back to the well. Let's be real. Sometimes your busyness is just a cover, a way to avoid what your soul is trying to say. If you slow down, you might have to face the pain, the disappointment, the emptiness. So you keep moving, keep posting, keep producing. But at night, the silence returns, and it whispers, "You're not okay." That's not defeat. That's an invitation. An invitation to slow down and be still and let God in again. If that's you, try this. Cancel something. Just one thing this week. Replace it with silence, with prayer, with worship. You don't have to disappear. You just need to reconnect. Take a walk without your phone. Read a psalm out loud. Ask God, "Where am I running ahead of you?" He'll show you. And not to shame you, but to bring you back to sender. You're not just a servant. You're a child. And children don't earn affection, they receive it. You don't have to prove yourself to God with your schedule. You just have to sit with Him. Like Mary, at His feet, listening, resting. That's where your soul gets filled. That's where the pressure lifts. That's where your purpose resets. Don't wait until you crash. Don't wait until you break down. If you feel empty now, stop now. Not forever, just long enough to hear again. To realign. To be reminded that the God who called you doesn't need your busyness. He wants your heart. And when your heart is full, everything else flows. Joy returns. Clarity sharpens. You start bearing fruit again, not from effort, but from overflow. Time. It's one of the most honest currencies of the soul. You can say what you want. You can believe what you want. But at the end of the day, what you give your time to reveals what your heart truly values. You may not even realize it. But your calendar, your screen time, your schedule, all of them are mirrors. They reflect what's truly sitting on the throne of your priorities. And the truth? It's not always God. Most people don't intentionally push God to the margins. Life just starts moving fast. A few skipped prayers here, a few busy mornings there. Work demands your attention. Family pulls your energy. Entertainment numbs your mind. And without realizing it, you've placed the King of Kings somewhere between your errands and your emails. Not out of rebellion, just busyness. But over time, that small neglect becomes spiritual drought. The Bible says in Matthew 6 verse 21, "Where your treasure is, there your heart will be also." And for most of us, time is the treasure we guard the most. So let's be real. Where's your time going? Not just what's on your to-do list, but what's in the hidden corners of your day. Do you reach for your phone before you whisper a prayer? Do you binge 3 episodes before you read 3 verses? These questions aren't to shame you. They're to awaken you. Because deep down, your soul already knows. It feels the hunger. It feels the disconnection. You're functioning, but not flourishing. And God's not angry. He's just not first. And that matters. Not because He needs your minutes, but because He wants your attention. He wants to be chosen, not squeezed in. He wants to be the first voice you hear, not the last resort when nothing else works. Time is sacred. It's not just a resource, it's a spiritual compass. And how you use it shapes who you become. If you give your best hours to stress, your spirit becomes anxious. If you give your energy to gossip, your soul becomes shallow. If you give your attention to God, consistently, humbly, you start to carry His peace, His vision, His pace. That's not religion, that's realignment. Maybe you feel far from God, but the truth is He never left. Your schedule just got crowded. The throne of your time was filled with lesser things, but you can take it back. One moment at a time, one decision at a time, one surrendered morning at a time. Because you don't drift into intimacy with God. You choose it. You protect it. You guard it like your life depends on it, because honestly, it does. Let's get practical. What would it look like if God truly got your first? Not your leftovers. Not your exhaustion. But your first. The first 10 minutes of your day. The first thought when your eyes open. The first plan on your calendar. It doesn't have to be dramatic. It just has to be intentional. Maybe it's opening your Bible app before checking your texts. Maybe it's putting on worship while you get ready. Maybe it's sitting in silence, whispering, "Speak, Lord, I'm listening." You'll be amazed at how those small choices shift everything else. Your reactions change. Your clarity sharpens. Your anxiety softens. Because when God gets your first, everything else finds its place. It's like the heart realigns, and suddenly the pressure lifts. Not because your life got easier, but because your soul got centered. And here's something deeper: giving God your time isn't just about discipline, it's about desire. It's not just about checking off a box, it's about hunger. The more time you spend with Him, the more you'll want to. The more you taste His peace, the more you'll crave it. Time with God isn't an obligation, it's a fountain. A secret place where your spirit gets filled again and again. But let's be honest, the enemy knows this. That's why he'll fight your time. He'll distract you, tempt you, exhaust you. Not always with evil, but with noise. He knows if he can keep you busy enough, entertained enough, reactive enough, you'll never pause long enough to be transformed. That's why guarding your time with God isn't just a good idea, it's spiritual warfare. Remember Psalm 90 verse 12, "Teach us to number our days, that we may gain a heart of wisdom." Time awareness leads to wisdom, and wisdom leads to order, and order leads to peace. So when you give God your time, you're not losing freedom, you're gaining purpose. You're saying, "I refuse to live rushed. I refuse to live distracted. I choose to live aligned." This is the moment to reclaim your mornings, to reset your routines, to silence the chaos and rediscover the simplicity of just being with God. He's not asking for hours of performance. He's asking for your heart. And your heart shows up in what you prioritize. Not just in crisis, but in consistency. So ask yourself, what does your schedule say about your soul? What would someone learn about your faith if they watch how you spend your time? Would they see intimacy with God or just survival mode? Would they see worship woven into your week or just obligation? These questions aren't meant to hurt you. They're meant to heal you, to draw you back into rhythm with the one who gave you time in the first place. You're not too busy for God. You're too precious to stay disconnected. And the moment you realign, the moment you say, "Lord, I've given my time to many things, but now I give it back to you," something shifts. Peace returns. Clarity sharpens. Priorities realign. And suddenly, what felt chaotic begins to breathe again. Why? Because you put Him first. Who are you when no one's watching? Who are you when you're not performing, producing, or pleasing? Most people spend their entire lives trying to answer this question, whether they realize it or not. Some try to find their identity in what they do, the job title, the role they play, the goals they chase. Others try to find it in what others think, the applause, the approval, the validation. But the truth? None of that can sustain your soul. Because you are not what you achieve. You are not what you've lost. You are not what people call you. You are who God says you are. And until that becomes your anchor, your identity will always feel fragile. One criticism can break you. One failure can define you. One comparison can crush you. That's why so many believers live exhausted, not from serving, but from pretending, from performing for acceptance instead of resting in it. But here's the truth no one tells you enough. Your identity isn't something you earn, it's something you receive. And it starts with one voice, the voice of your Father. In Genesis 1 verse 27, Scripture says, "So God created man in His own image." That means before you did anything, you were already marked by value. You weren't created to impress, you were created to reflect, to mirror His love, His character, His presence. But sin distorted that mirror. And ever since, humanity's been trying to rebuild its worth in broken ways. Through power, through image, through hustle. But deep inside, the question still echoes, who am I really? The enemy loves to twist that question. From the garden until today, his tactic hasn't changed: attack your identity. When he tempted Jesus in the wilderness, he didn't go after his miracles or ministry. He started with, "If you are the Son of God," the same tactic he uses on you. If you were really loved, you wouldn't feel this way. If you were really chosen, why is life so hard? Lies. All of them. designed to make you question the truth God has already spoken over you. So what has he spoken? That you are chosen, 1 Peter 2, verse 9. That you are a new creation, 2 Corinthians 5, verse 17. That you are his workmanship, Ephesians 2, verse 10. That you are loved with an everlasting love, Jeremiah 31, verse 3. These aren't just poetic phrases. They are identity declarations. Truths that silence the shame, that cancel the labels, that realign your soul. But here's the thing, they only carry power when you believe them, not just read them. Maybe your whole life, you were told you had to be a certain way to be enough, to be lovable, to be wanted. So you became what others needed, strong, funny, successful, silent, whatever kept the peace. And now, you don't know who you are when you're not playing a role. That's not failure, that's fatigue. And God is calling you back, not to another version of yourself, but to your real self hidden in him. Colossians 3 verse 3 says, "Your life is now hidden with Christ in God." That means your worth is safe. Your future is secure. Your story is wrapped in something unshakable. And when the world tries to reduce you to your past, your pace, or your popularity, you can rest in the truth. I am who he says I am, even when I don't feel it, even when I don't see it, even when I'm doubting. His word is more reliable than my emotions. So, how do you live from that place? How do you root yourself in identity when everything around you tries to uproot you? You start by listening, really listening to what God says. Not just in church, not just on Sundays, but daily, in the stillness, in the Word. You replace the voice of culture with the voice of truth. You meditate on verses that tell you who you are. You journal the moments God reminded you that you're not what you feared, you're His. And when insecurity creeps in, and it will, you don't spiral. You speak back. You say out loud, I'm a child of God. I'm not forgotten. I'm not what I did. I'm not what they said. I am forgiven. I am restored. I am called. I am known. Because identity isn't a feeling. It's a foundation. And when you build your life on that foundation, storms don't shake you the same way. You still feel them, but you don't fall apart. Because your worth was never tied to your performance. It was tied to God's promise. Think of the prodigal son. He ran from his father. He wasted everything. And when he came back, ashamed and dirty, he said, I'm no longer worthy to be called your son. But the father interrupted him, ran to him, robed him, restored him. Why? Because his sonship wasn't based on behavior, it was based on relationship. That's you. Even in your worst moment, God doesn't call you by your failure. He calls you by your name. And maybe today, God is calling you by that name again. Maybe this whole video isn't just about putting God first. Maybe it's about remembering who you are when He is first. You don't have to build your identity anymore. You don't have to wear the mask. You don't have to earn love. You already have it. You just have to receive it. Rest in it. Let it sink deeper than the lies ever did. So the next time you look in the mirror and wonder who you are, don't ask the world. Don't ask your past. Ask your Creator. And He will whisper back, you are mine. Let's be honest, surrender sounds beautiful in theory. It looks poetic in a worship song. It's powerful on a sermon slide. But in real life, surrender is scary. It feels like weakness, like letting go of what you can see for something invisible, like trusting a God you believe in but can't always trace. And that's why so many of us struggle with it. Not because we don't love God, but because we're still learning how to trust Him completely. There's something in us, in our flesh, in our culture, that resists surrender. We've been trained to stay in control, to manage the outcomes, to fix the problems ourselves. Surrender feels like giving up, like sitting still when everything screams for action. But here's what most people miss. Surrender isn't defeat. It's direction. It's not passive, it's powerful. Because the moment you let go of your way, you make space for God's way. Think about this. How much stress in your life comes from trying to control things you were never meant to carry? That relationship, that timeline, that expectation, that reputation. And it's not working. Because you were never built to play God. You were built to follow Him, to depend on Him, to rest in Him. But that only happens when you surrender, not just the parts of life that feel easy, but the parts that feel sacred, the ones you're afraid to lose. Let's bring this closer. Maybe you've been praying for clarity, but holding on to your own plan, asking for peace, but refusing to release that grudge, seeking direction, but filtering everything through your fear. That's not surrender, that's negotiation. And God doesn't negotiate with pride. He calls it out, not to shame you, but to set you free. Because control feels safe until it becomes the prison of your own making. Look at Moses. God called him to lead Israel out of Egypt. But Moses didn't feel qualified. He stuttered. He doubted. He tried to argue with God. Who am I to go? But God didn't change his plan. He changed Moses. And it started when Moses surrendered. When he stopped arguing and said, "Here I am, send me." That moment of surrender became the turning point of an entire generation's freedom. Or take Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane, the Son of God, trembling in agony, praying, "If possible, take this cup from me. Yet not my will, but yours be done." That's surrender. Not because it felt good, but because he trusted the Father more than his feelings. And through that surrender, salvation came to the world. If even Jesus had to surrender through suffering, why would we expect it to always feel easy? Here's the truth. Surrender often starts with pain, with disappointment, with being brought to the end of yourself. Because that's where surrender becomes real. Not just words, but posture. Not just emotion, but obedience. You let go, not because you feel like it, but because you know God is better. His plans are wiser. His timing is perfect. His heart is trustworthy, even when your circumstances are not. So why is it so hard? Because surrender requires trust. Trust requires vulnerability. And vulnerability feels risky, especially when life has taught you to protect yourself, to always have a backup plan, to never let anyone see your fear. But God doesn't work in guarded hearts. He works in open ones. Not perfect, not fearless, just open. Just willing to say, "Lord, I'm tired of carrying this alone." Maybe you're there right now. You're exhausted, not just physically, but emotionally, spiritually. You've been trying to make life work, to hold all the pieces. And God is saying to you, gently but firmly, let go. Let me hold what you can't fix. That's not weakness. That's wisdom. That's faith. The kind that says, even if I don't see how, I trust too. Here's what surrender looks like in practice. You pray before you plan. You ask before you assume. You obey even when it doesn't make sense. You forgive even when it still hurts. You give even when it feels risky. You rest even when the world tells you to hustle. Surrender isn't a one-time event. It's a lifestyle, a rhythm, a decision you make every day, and sometimes every hour. It might help to write it down. Try this. Take a journal and write a list of things you've been holding too tightly. Name them. The relationship, the fear, the timeline, the outcome. Then pray over each one, saying, "God, this belongs to you now." That's surrender. That's worship. That's what moves heaven. And here's the promise. God never wastes surrendered pain. What you let go of, He uses. What you release, He redeems. What you offer, He transforms. You may not see it right away, but trust is never a waste. Surrender is never a mistake. It's the door to divine peace. And it opens when you finally stop fighting for control and start resting in His care. The question isn't whether God is able to move. It's whether you're willing to let Him. And if you are, then get ready. Because what's waiting on the other side of surrender is not loss, it's life. Not regret, but restoration. Not fear, but freedom. All He needs is your yes, your willingness, your heart, open and yielded. It's easy to say God is first, but the real test, it shows up in how you handle your money, how you spend your time, what you allow your mind to dwell on when no one's watching. These three areas, finances, time, and thoughts, are like windows into your soul. And they don't lie. They reveal where your trust really lives. Not just what you say in worship, but what you live on a Tuesday afternoon when life gets loud and bills pile up and anxiety starts whispering again. Let's start with finances. This one is tender because for most of us, money isn't just about math, it's emotional. It's survival. It's legacy. It's security. And that's why it's one of the most spiritually revealing areas in your life. In Matthew 6 verse 24, Jesus said, "You cannot serve both God and money." He didn't say that money is evil. He said that trying to serve both is impossible. One will always take the throne, and the one that does will shape your decisions, your peace, your direction. So what does it look like to put God first in your finances? It means your giving doesn't come from what's left. It comes from the first. That's what the Bible calls a tithe, giving back the first 10% as an act of trust. Not because God needs your money, but because your heart needs to remember who your provider is. When you tithe, you're saying, "God, this job isn't my source. You are." And that declaration silences fear. It breaks greed. It opens doors for provision you can't manufacture on your own. But it doesn't stop at tithing. Putting God first means being wise and prayerful with the rest. It means not spending to soothe what only His presence can heal. It means setting a budget that reflects kingdom values, generosity, stewardship, purpose. Maybe for you, it means canceling a subscription so you can support a missionary. Maybe it means trusting God to tithe when your budget is tight and watching Him multiply what remains. Either way, the question isn't, can I afford to put God first? It's, can I afford not to? Now let's talk about time. Time is like a river. Once it flows past, you can't get it back. And in today's culture, it's easy to live in a constant rush. Meetings, notifications, errands, deadlines. Before you know it, a week has passed and you can't remember the last time you sat still in God's presence. But here's the truth. What you give your time to, you give your attention to. And what has your attention begins to shape your heart. When you put God first in your time, your whole life starts to align. Not because you're spending hours in a monastery, but because you're creating space for God to speak. Maybe it's waking up 15 minutes earlier to read Scripture. Maybe it's inviting Him into your commute through worship. Maybe it's turning off the noise at night and just sitting in silence. The how isn't as important as the intentionality, because time given to God is never wasted. It's invested in eternity. You don't have to be a monk to prioritize Him. You just have to start. Start where you are. With the mornings you want to scroll. With the lunch breaks you want to fill with YouTube. Replace one moment of distraction with one moment of connection. It will change you, not overnight, but over time. And eventually, you'll notice something shifting. You'll crave His voice more than the noise. You'll notice when your soul is drifting. Because now, time isn't just busy, it's holy. And now, let's enter the battleground most people never talk about out loud, your thought life. This is where the enemy wages silent war. Where lies whisper in the background while you smile in public. Where shame echoes from your past. Where fear scripts your future. That's why 2 Corinthians 10 verse 5 says we must take every thought captive to make it obedient to Christ. That's not a metaphor. It's a spiritual strategy. Putting God first in your thoughts means guarding your mental gates. What you watch, what you meditate on, what you rehearse in your mind. If your thoughts are filled with fear, it's hard to walk in faith. If they're filled with offense, it's hard to walk in love. If they're filled with lust, it's hard to walk in purity. That's why Paul says in Philippians 4 verse 8, whatever is true, noble, right, pure, think on these things. Because what fills your mind eventually directs your life. So how do you do it? You start by noticing. Become aware of what's occupying your mental space. What lies are playing on repeat? What narratives are you agreeing with that God never said? Then speak back. Use Scripture. Use worship. Use silence. Memorize a verse that counters that lie. Write down what God says about you and read it out loud every morning. Renew your mind, not just occasionally, but daily. It's not about perfection, it's about realignment. Let's be honest. These three areas, money, time, and thoughts, feel personal. Maybe even private. But God is personal too. He wants to be invited into every corner of your life. Not just Sunday mornings, but Tuesday mornings when your bank account feels tight. Not just at church, but in your living room when your mind is racing. He wants to guide your decisions, steady your emotions, shape your habits. But that only happens when He's first. not after, not if there's time. First, this is your moment to reset, to realign, not through guilt, but through grace. Ask the Holy Spirit right now, where have I been holding control? Is it your finances, your time, your thoughts? Then pray, God, I want you to be first here. Teach me, guide me, convict me when I drift. Redirect me when I get distracted. He will, because that's what He wants too. Not your performance, but your presence. Not your perfection, but your invitation. And when God becomes first in what's most vulnerable, everything else starts to shift. Peace deepens. Clarity comes. Strength rises. Not because life gets easier, but because now you're not living it alone. You're walking in rhythm with heaven. There's something sacred about the morning. Before the notifications start buzzing, before the emails, before the demands, before the world begins pulling on you from every side, there's a stillness in those first few moments, a blank canvas for your soul. And what you do with those first minutes, it matters. Because the first thing you give your attention to becomes the thing that shapes your posture for the rest of the day. That's why morning surrender is more than a routine. It's a weapon, a declaration, a decision to say, God, before anything else, I choose you. Let's be honest, most mornings don't feel holy. They feel rushed, chaotic, groggy. The alarm feels too early. The coffee feels too necessary. Your thoughts already feel too loud. That's why morning surrender isn't something that happens by accident. It's something you choose. It's a moment of resistance in a culture that wants to rush you into performance before you even remember who you are. But when you pause even for 5 minutes and breathe and pray and say, Lord, this day is yours, something shifts. You don't have to be a morning person to start your morning with God. You just have to be intentional. It's not about checking a box or reciting perfect prayers. It's about realigning your spirit before the noise begins. It's about giving God the first whisper of your heart. Before your phone, before your worries, before the weight of the world has a chance to land on your shoulders. Because if you don't start with God, the world will start without Him, and take your peace with it. In Mark 1 verse 35 we read, very early in the morning, while it was still dark, Jesus got up, left the house and went off to a solitary place where He prayed. That's not just a detail, that's a pattern. Even Jesus, surrounded by crowds, demands, and miracles, made time before the sun rose to be with the Father. If He needed it, we definitely do. Because without it, we drift. Slowly, subtly, we start reacting instead of responding, striving instead of trusting, performing instead of abiding. Maybe you felt that. The difference between days you start with God and days you don't. On the surface, they might look the same, but internally, one feels grounded. The other feels scattered. One flows with grace. The other fights through pressure. That's the power of morning surrender, not that it changes your circumstances, but that it changes you. Your mindset, your focus, your capacity to love and listen and lead with humility. So what does it look like practically? It can be as simple as sitting up, placing your feet on the floor, and whispering, "Thank you for breath in my lungs. Let me today." It can be reading one psalm before checking social media. It can be writing down one thing you're grateful for and one person to pray for. The point isn't how long, it's how present. Because the goal isn't performance, it's presence. Morning surrender is also a spiritual shield. It guards your heart before offense can take root. It prepares your mind before anxiety can steal your peace. It reminds your spirit, I'm not in control, but I know the one who is. That mindset doesn't just carry you through problems, it transforms how you approach them. You become more grounded, less reactive, more aware of God in the small moments that used to go unnoticed. Think of it like this: every morning, you step into a spiritual battlefield. The enemy knows your patterns. He knows what triggers your stress. He knows the headlines that will shake your faith. The moment your feet hit the floor, warfare begins, not with weapons, but with whispers, doubt, distraction, delay. But when you've already surrendered to God, those tactics lose their power. You're not waking up to the battle, you're waking up ready for it. And here's something tender to remember: God is already waiting for you in the morning. He doesn't roll his eyes when you snooze your alarm. He doesn't need you to quote 10 verses before he meets you. He just wants your heart, your honesty, your time. Like a loving father, he's eager to sit with you, to speak life over you, to remind you who you are before the world tries to rename you. All you have to do is show up. Let's make it practical. Maybe you're thinking, I'm too busy. Start with 5 minutes. Wake up 10 minutes earlier. Put your phone across the room so you don't reach for it first. Keep a Bible or a journal on your nightstand. Set a soft worship playlist. Light a candle. Create a space that feels like sanctuary, even if it's small. The goal isn't production, it's presence. Consistency. A rhythm of grace that starts your day with God's voice, not the world's noise. If you've struggled with this before, don't quit. Don't shame yourself. Don't say, I'm just not good at this. That's not the point. God isn't measuring your spiritual routine. He's drawing you back into rhythm, into rest, into relationship. And every morning you choose to surrender, even when you don't feel like it, you're building something sacred. Not just a habit, a home for His presence. Because ultimately, morning surrender is about posture. It's about saying, God, before I try to carry the world, I let you carry me. It's about pausing before performing, listening before speaking, receiving before striving. And when you start there, when you root your mornings in His presence, you'll be surprised how much lighter everything else becomes. Fear has a way of sneaking in quietly. It doesn't always come as a scream. Sometimes it's a whisper, a what if, a maybe, a silent heaviness pressing on your chest at 3 a.m. And the truth is, most people don't walk around terrified. They walk around tense, on edge, overthinking, always bracing for impact, even when everything looks fine on the outside. And where does that tension come from? Almost always from living like you are the one in control. That's why putting God first changes everything. Not just your habits, but your heart. Because the moment He becomes central, fear loses its grip. Not instantly, not magically, but steadily, gradually. Like the sun rising, slow at first, but strong. When you start your day, your decisions, and your thoughts with God at the center, it creates space where fear used to live. You begin to see that you are not alone, that you don't have to carry it all, that He is present and powerful. Fear thrives in chaos, in confusion, in the unknown. That's why the enemy loves to cloud your mind, to rush your decisions, to pressure your spirit. Because when you're moving too fast to pause, you forget who your defender is. You start solving problems that God never told you to carry. And before you know it, your peace is gone. Your sleep is shallow. Your shoulders are heavy. But when God is first, the storm may still come. It just doesn't own you anymore. Think of Peter walking on water. In Matthew 14, Jesus calls him out of the boat. And for a moment, with his eyes on Jesus, Peter does the impossible. But the second he looks at the wind and the waves, he begins to sink. That's fear. It didn't have the power to drown him until it distracted him. And that's what fear does. It tries to shift your gaze, to pull your attention away from the one who called you and fix it on everything that could go wrong. But Jesus didn't let Peter drown. He reached out immediately, lifted him, walked him back. That's what He does with you. Even when fear takes over, even when your faith feels small, even when you've taken your eyes off Him, His hand is still strong. His grace is still near. His love still lifts. That's the kind of God you serve, one who doesn't shame your fear but rescues you from it. When God is first, you begin to speak from faith, not fear. Your words shift. Your posture changes. You stop rehearsing what might go wrong and start declaring what's already true. You remember verses like Isaiah 41 verse 10. Do not fear, for I am with you. Do not be dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you and help you. That's not just poetic, that's power. The kind that silences panic. That steadies hands. That anchors your thoughts. Let's bring it close. Maybe lately, your fear hasn't been loud. It's been low-grade. Like background noise. Fear of not being enough. Fear of being alone. Fear of failing. Fear that God's promises are for others, but not for you. You smile through it. You function in spite of it. But it's draining. Because fear is like a slow leak in your spirit. You don't notice it at first, but over time it empties you. Here's the turning point. When you put God first, you start filling that space again. Not with empty optimism, but with truth, with worship, with scripture. You start replacing the narrative of fear with the reality of His Word. You say, even if I don't feel it, I choose to believe God is with me. God is for me. God is already in my tomorrow. That doesn't mean you never feel afraid again. It means fear no longer gets the final word. One of the most powerful things you can do is speak back to fear, out loud. When anxious thoughts start circling, declare God's promises. Sing, pray, whisper His name. Sometimes the most spiritual thing you can do is breathe and say, Jesus, I trust you. That simple act becomes a wall fear cannot pass. Because you're not ignoring reality, you're inviting God into it. And His presence changes everything. If you want fear to lose its power, make time for the presence of God. Not once a week, but every single day. Start small. One psalm, one moment of silence, one prayer before work. Make Him your first thought, your first response, your first refuge. The more you do, the more fear starts to fade. Not because the world gets safer, but because your soul gets stronger. And don't be surprised if fear tries to come back. It always does. But this time you're ready. Because now your house is built on the rock. Your heart is rooted in something unshakable. And even when the wind blows, you're not moved. You're anchored. You've made God first, and because of that, you are no longer a prisoner to fear. But seek first the kingdom of God and His righteousness, and all these things will be added to you. Matthew 6 verse 33. It's one of the most quoted verses in Scripture, and yet one of the most misunderstood. It sounds simple, seek God first, and He'll take care of everything else. But if we're honest, it often feels like a puzzle. I'm seeking God, but where's the breakthrough? I'm praying, but I'm still waiting. That tension, it reveals something deeper. We often treat this verse like a formula instead of a relationship. God never meant for Matthew 6 verse 33 to become a transaction. It's not. If I give God my morning, He'll give me a miracle. It's a blueprint for peace, a path back to spiritual alignment. Because when Jesus said those words, He wasn't handing out spiritual vending machine instructions. He was inviting His followers into a new way of living, one that starts with trust, not performance, with presence, not panic. Let's look at the context. Jesus is talking to people worried about daily life, food, clothes, money, tomorrow. Sounds familiar, doesn't it? These aren't abstract problems. They're the things that weigh on your mind at 2 a.m. The bills, the diagnosis, the kids, the loneliness. And in the middle of that worry, Jesus doesn't offer quick solutions. He offers a shift of focus. Seek first the kingdom. That means, instead of obsessing over what you don't have, prioritize who you do have. Instead of chasing outcomes, pursue the one who holds them. Instead of trying to secure your own future, align your life with the one who already wrote it. Seeking first the kingdom isn't about ignoring your needs. It's about putting them in the right order. Because when God is in His rightful place, everything else finds its place too. Let's be practical. What does seeking first look like in daily life? It's choosing prayer before panic. It's opening your Bible before you open your emails. It's asking God for wisdom before you call a friend. It's putting integrity before opportunity. It's honoring God with your finances, even when it's uncomfortable. It's making decisions based on obedience, not pressure. It's choosing to be faithful in the small things, trusting that He sees and rewards in His time. Maybe you've been doing all of that and still feel stuck, still waiting, still hoping. Let me say this gently but clearly. Seeking the kingdom doesn't always mean things get easier, but it does mean your soul gets steadier. Because God's priority isn't to always give you more, it's to form Christ in you. And sometimes that formation happens in silence, in waiting, in the unseen obedience that no one applauds, but heaven notices. When you seek His kingdom first, you start seeing differently. You start noticing blessings that stress used to blind you to. You start recognizing divine interruptions as invitations. You stop measuring your worth by how much you've accomplished and start anchoring your identity in how deeply you're known. That's not religion. That's kingdom living. And it changes you from the inside out. There's a quiet confidence that comes from seeking the kingdom first. It doesn't scream. It doesn't need to prove anything. It just walks in peace. It shows up in how you respond to conflict, in how you steward your resources, in how you forgive before you're asked. It's the fruit of alignment. Because when God is first, you're no longer chasing the world for what only the King can provide. Let's get even closer. Seeking first doesn't mean you neglect your responsibilities. It means you invite God into them, into the parenting, into the budgeting, into the job search, into the grief. It means you don't just ask God to bless your plans, you ask Him for the plan itself. You surrender your timeline, your expectations, your outcomes, not because it's easy, but because it's worth it. And when you do, when you truly make His kingdom and righteousness your top pursuit, you begin to experience the promise, and all these things will be added to you. Not always the way you imagined, not always on your timeline, but with precision, with wisdom, with love. Because God knows what you need better than you do, and He knows when you're ready to receive it. Here's a challenge. Take inventory of your pursuits. What gets your best energy, your best attention, your first thoughts in the morning, your last thoughts at night? If it's not God, don't beat yourself up, but don't stay there either. Make a shift. Start small. Write Matthew 6 verse 33 on a sticky note. Put it on your mirror, on your phone, on your fridge. Let it reshape the way you move through your day. You may not be able to control everything, but you can control what you seek. And when you seek God's heart, you start walking in God's pace. You stop striving to build your own empire and start stewarding the kingdom you've been invited into. And suddenly, the pressure lifts. Not because life is perfect, but because your priorities are. So the next time you feel overwhelmed, stop, breathe, whisper, seek first. Let those two words reset you, remind you, realign you. You weren't made to carry it all. You were made to follow the King. How do you know if you're truly putting God first? It's a question that lingers in the hearts of many believers, especially those who've been walking by faith but still battling doubt. Because let's be real, spiritual alignment isn't always loud. It doesn't always come with fireworks or feel like you're on fire every single day. Sometimes it looks quiet, ordinary, steady. So how do you know? What are the signs that your heart is actually seeking the kingdom first? The answer isn't in how busy you are at church or how many devotionals you've completed. It's deeper than that. One of the first signs is inner peace, not the absence of conflict, but the presence of calm in the middle of it. When God is first, your soul knows where to rest. You might still face challenges, but you don't unravel the same way. You process pain through His promises. You breathe differently. You pray instead of panic. You listen more than you react. There's a stillness inside you that can't be explained, only experienced. Another sign, clarity. Not always about the future, but about what matters most. When you're aligned with God, the noise of the world starts to fade. You stop chasing every opportunity that comes your way because you've learned to discern what is from Him and what is just a distraction. You start asking different questions, not, will this make me successful? But, will this keep me surrendered? Your decisions become more grounded, more thoughtful, more spirit-led. And then there's direction. When God is first, He orders your steps, even when you don't see the full map. Proverbs 3 verses 5-6 says, "Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways submit to Him, and He will make your path straight." That doesn't mean the road will always be smooth, but it does mean your path will have purpose. You start walking with a quiet confidence, knowing that even detours can be divine when your heart is aligned. You'll also notice a shift in how you respond to others. Humility starts replacing ego. Compassion rises. You become slower to judge and quicker to forgive. That doesn't happen because you try harder. It happens because God is working deeper. He softens your heart. He gives you eyes to see others the way He sees them. Even when people hurt you, you respond from a place of grace, not because it's easy, but because you know how much you've been forgiven. Putting God first also shows up in your priorities. You begin to reevaluate how you spend your time, your money, your energy. What used to be non-negotiable, that extra project, that toxic relationship, that late-night escape, suddenly starts losing its grip. Not because you've become religious, but because you've become realigned. You don't want to waste time anymore. You want to invest it in what lasts. You want to build with God, not just for Him. There's also a noticeable increase in your discernment. You're no longer as easily swayed by emotion or pressure. You start recognizing God's fingerprints in the small things. That moment of silence before a big decision. That conviction that keeps you from compromising. That peace that shows up when you take a step of obedience. These aren't coincidences, they're confirmations. They're the fruit of a life that's being led, not just lived. And let's not forget gratitude. It becomes your posture, your lens. You stop needing everything to be perfect to feel content. You start thanking God in the hallway before the door opens. You celebrate small wins. You find beauty in the ordinary. Because when God is first, your joy isn't tied to outcomes. It's tied to intimacy. Just being with Him is enough. You'll also notice an increase in spiritual authority. Not in a loud or flashy way, but in quiet consistency. Your prayers carry weight. Your words bring healing. Your presence brings peace. Why? Because you're carrying God's heart. You're not just talking about faith, you're living from it. And people can feel that. Your life becomes a testimony, not because it's perfect, but because it's anchored. And here's something powerful. When God is truly first, fear loses power. You still feel it, but it no longer leads you. You don't make decisions based on what could go wrong. You make them based on who God is. That kind of courage doesn't come from hype, it comes from intimacy. From daily surrender. From choosing trust over control, even when everything in you wants to hold on tight. So let me ask you gently, what signs are showing up in your life right now? Is there peace or just pressure? Is there clarity or constant confusion? Is your time centered on Him or just squeezed in? Are your thoughts shaped more by the Word or the world? Don't ask these questions to shame yourself, ask them to realign. Because alignment isn't about perfection, it's about intention. If you feel out of sync right now, there's no condemnation, just an invitation. Come back to the center. Back to the first love. Back to the one who doesn't need your performance, just your presence. Ask Him, Lord, what needs to shift in me? He'll show you. He's gentle. He's patient. He's waiting, not to punish you, but to realign you. And when you let Him, when you truly place Him first, you'll begin to live from a place of flow instead of fight, from rest instead of rush, from fullness instead of emptiness. Because that's what happens when God is first. Everything starts to fall into place, not because life is easy, but because your foundation is unshakable. Maybe what you need right now isn't a new plan, but a new posture. Maybe it's not about doing more, but surrendering deeper. You've tried your way. You've carried the weight. You've held it all together, or at least tried to. But what if the breakthrough, the clarity, the peace you've been longing for, is on the other side of one simple shift, putting God back in His rightful place? Because here's the truth. When God is first, everything else follows. It might not happen overnight. It might not always feel dramatic. But slowly, like a river carving through stone, things start to move. You begin to walk lighter, think clearer, love better, hope stronger. Not because life got easier, but because your foundation got deeper. Maybe you've realized during this video that God's been gently nudging you back. Not condemning, not scolding, just reminding you, I never left. I've just been waiting to be first again. And today can be that moment. Right here, right now. You don't have to fix it all before you come. You just have to come. Let go of whatever's been on the throne of your heart, fear, pride, distraction, control, and give God the center again. Ask yourself from a quiet place, what has taken God's place in my life? What am I trusting more than I trust Him? What area have I been managing in my own strength that I need to surrender? Write it down, name it, and then speak back to it aloud. God, you are first in this, in all. If this message resonated with you, take a step of faith, not just in your heart, but in community. Comment below. God first, always. Declare it. Let it be your line in the sand. Your public yes to what God is doing in private. And share this video with someone else who might be silently drifting. Someone who needs to hear not just that God is powerful, but that He's personal. That He sees. That He restores. That He still wants first place, not because He needs control, but because He loves deeply. And if you want more messages like this to keep your spirit anchored and your soul growing, subscribe to this channel. Hit the bell so you don't miss the next word that might just meet you exactly where you are. Because this isn't the end of your journey, it's the alignment you've been needing. And now that you've put God first, just watch what He puts into place next.